would have liked to have got the details on. I've copied all the stuff down that you were talking about the broth and so on. What I noticed is in his last work, Dr. Rosenow was using just a nichrome wire, and he would go from the first tube to the second tube and swirl that around and then go to the third, so that he had a very dilute solution already by the third tube. And so in his later work, he was just using the 3 tubes. In his last 2 articles, he was just...
Okay.
Because he was no longer using the pipette to go from one to the other, he would just really make it very dilute.
Sure. And incinerating that wire, of course, the pores were open enough to take a very minute amount of that original culture to tube number 2, and then burning it off again, and after you thoroughly mix the microbes in that particular tube, transferring once again to the next tube.
Right.
Well, the glycerin salt solution was very effective in maintaining the specificity, which could be confirmed serologically. So, but here again, I used to lyophilize my cultures too, harvest the cells and lyophilize them and use them then in successive experiments. But
what did you say you did to them? The words you used?
Lyophilized, the freeze-dried.
Okay.
You freeze them under vacuum, and you then have only the lyophilized pellet remaining of cells, and seal those, hermetically seal them in glass tubes, and we used to label them with actually we used a very small artist brush, and we'd put the number on with black enamel, so that there weren't labels that would fluff off or what have you. And of course we kept our journal records of each individual number, source of the organisms, and so on,
The word that you used, lyophilized?
Lyophiliced. Lyophilized.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay, I just wanted to get that correct. You were talking about the polio thing. I think that's the other factor, the other reason. Aside from Holman, it's the question of all of a sudden Sabin and Salk came in with these vaccines and everybody stopped looking at polio.
Well, sure. And then, my wife worked on polio research. She was a research assistant. And Hammer and Cheevers, Dr. Hammond and Cheever, came from Harvard, were the first 2 investigators to establish a graduate school of public health at the University of Pittsburgh. Salk had his laboratories in the same building in the bottom 2 floors. And then, of course, as you know, Sabin at University of Cincinnati came out with the attenuated vaccine, and then of course he would criticize every time the Salk vaccine was used. He'd criticize it, saying it wasn't as good and so on, and yet the fact is that Salk had that vaccine out several years before Sabin's came out.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of people who were spared suffering and dying from that disease. The other thing is, for example, in Finland, they've quit using Sabin vaccine because it's not common, but you do get an occasional case of polio.
Right, I've been reading about that too.
So in Finland, they have made the Salk vaccine more antigenic and a higher concentration, and have been using that rather than using the Sabin vaccine. But once these vaccines were out, the reason for doing any basic research to see whether in fact Rosenow's work could be replicated, isolating filterable viruses from cultures.
Right.
That's out the window. Nobody's going to fool with that now.
Yeah.
You couldn't do any clinical studies anyway because you have herd immunity now with so many people vaccinated, and
right.
It's just not going to happen.
Right. Well, you know that Dr. Rosenow, you're familiar with Dr. Rappaport? Have you heard that name?
Yes.
He particularly published a couple of articles that gave very dramatic results with Rosenow's vaccines in polio therapeutically.
Yeah.
Well, these kids would walk in and they were close to dead, and they basically all walked out of the hospital. It was just incredible.
Yeah. Well, rather comparable circumstance existed with the pandemic of influenza in 18 and 19, and the patients that received a prophylactic immunization from him, many of them were spared the attacks of influenza. And beyond that, the vaccine that they used, I know he saved many of those in glycerin salt solution, those cell concentrates.
Uh-huh.
And I know that for many years, I supplied those to physicians who would give those prior to the flu season arriving, and with very good results. Here again, though, they're right now frightened that this avian strain might replicate the pandemic that happened in 1819. And of course, they're very busy gearing up, trying to do genetic and antigenic analyses of the strains that they have isolated. And of course, pharmaceutical companies are going to be there to make up vaccines from those. Of course, they made a faux pas here in the swine flu epidemic that didn't really come off, but a lot of vaccine was made and sold and was not really useful.
Yeah.
They make a big investment when they go into something like this, and I understand that, but no one's experiments are infallible. So you are pretty well convinced from your experimental data that this is the turkey that you want to really kill, and doesn't always work.
Could that the Dr. Rosenow's vaccine from the 1919, could that be revived, or is that gone now?
Oh no, those organisms, you see, whenever they were preserved in glycerin salt solution, they're not active. They're
Right.
not viable.
Or they're not.
No.
So you can't really culture those.
No.
Can't bring them back.
No. Sorry.
So when it's gone, it's gone.
Yeah, that's true, and that's unfortunately freeze drying. Under vacuum wasn't something that was done back in those days.
Oh, okay. So with freeze drying them, you can preserve that.
Oh, sure.
Without, and preserve the antigenicity as well.
Oh, yes, sure. And you'd usually use some proteinaceous agent to, like a little bit of serum, neutral serum, to help protect the cells from destruction whenever they're freeze-dried. Oh yeah, I had hundreds and hundreds of different alpha-hemolytic streptococci freeze-dried, and ultimately when I sent cultures to the American Type Culture Collection with antiserum specific for them, excuse me, they always break open one or two of those lyophilized cultures and check them against the serum, and to confirm their specificity. In my case, it was with 6 other strains. No, those will keep indefinitely.
And they still have those?
Yeah, they're in the collection. They're in the American Type Culture Collection.
Where are they located?
In Maryland.
Okay. Interesting.
I have a catalog but any academic department of microbiology has an ATCC culture catalog.
Right. There was a couple things that I just wanted to mention to you. I understand. I don't want to get involved in something that's not my business, but I did find references of ECs to the relationship between the streptococci and cancer, both early and late in his career, in just 2 instances. And in one of his last articles, he was showing how it wasn't a very in-depth study, but just that he was getting skin reactions that were compatible with reactions in the cases of other diseases. And further, that he worked with, of course, it's well known that his work was with stomach ulcers very early in the game. And we know that there's a progression between stomach ulcers and stomach carcinoma. So it would not be surprising if the reason for the persistence of cancer is it may also be related to these oral foci. There's a fella in San Diego, a Dr. Issels, who is independently, he's very doing all of his work on cancer. The first thing he does is he removes any oral foci. And it just seems like this would be the indicated procedure. I heard that you had been tied up over the Christmas season because a family member has been diagnosed. And I would just the thought being is that if you can get these vaccines, some autogenous vaccine made for your daughter, that this might be a really good first step. And then the second would be is to get these oral foci if she's got any cavities, or especially root canals, but even beyond that, any kind of cavities, because these are, again, in accord with your friend Fischer, these are, I'm characterizing them as ulcers. They're ulcers of the bone.
Sure.
So that anything that she's got that is not, that is in the way of a cavity, a filling, or a root canal or whatever, that should be that would seem to be indicated as one of the first steps that you'd want to take in terms of turning her disease around. And then the next would be to try to get this vaccine for her, so that she could, fight the disease. I just wanted to share that thought with you, and beyond getting rid of the oral foci, the diseased teeth, you definitely would want to get something done with because when these are in your mouth for a long time, of course, the jawbone gets infected. And I can refer you to in particular Dr. Christopher Husser in Reno, Nevada, who is an expert in this area and is also very interested in your work as well. So that and if it's not convenient for her to see him, he would be able to refer to somebody that is knowledgeable of this. And has been working with cleaning these out. So it's just something that might be helpful. I just wanted to offer that to you.
Yes, well, I appreciate that. But Lisa went into the Bone Marrow Center at Jewish Hospital in Cincinnati.
Okay.
And she was, they harvested stem cells. It's a stem cell pheresis.
Right.
And she went through that for 4 hours, each of 4 days, until they got enough stem cells. And then they gave her intravenous chemo for 3.5 days, and then waited 3 more days before they gave her stem cells back. So she is recovering rather nicely so far.
Okay.
And of course, you don't expect this sort of thing with children.
Sure.
And hell, she's 40 years old. She's had this now. She first developed cancer 4.5 years ago. So it's been a long haul.
What's the condition of her teeth, doctor?
Well, they're very good, and she has a superb dentist. And
they've all been taken in by this hoax, though. They're all trying to save teeth, and we just can't save them. They can't be saved.
That's right.
So she's probably got some fillings in there.
Well, she may have, and it's something that her current dentist is going to, give priority attention to as soon as she's able. She still has to avoid people.
Right.
Because she's still, her white count isn't high enough to allow her to go out in crowds and so on. And so she is staying at home by and large and trying to keep from getting a respiratory infection or whatever until she gets her white count up to about 4,000.
Is she in Ohio?
Yes.
In Miami?
No, it's in Oxford, Ohio.
She's in Oxford, Ohio?
Yes, and that's where Miami is located.
Right, I'm sorry.
But she lives in a suburb here of Oxford. And that's saying a lot, she lives in the country.
Right.
Really. Oxford, a pretty small town.
I was asking that. I'll talk to Dr. Husser and see if he might know of someone in that area where she could get a second dental opinion. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Because and also just that just again to suggest that that we inspired by Dr. Fischer that we acknowledge that you just can't save these teeth. And when people get rid of cancer one place, it comes back someplace else, and that's what so it's coming from somewhere.
Yes.
And it probably is that oral focus. I've studied EC for too many years. I mean, not, close to 10. And there's no flaws in his work. And you know that. So that we have to conclude that this is why we have this epidemic of cancer in this country, is because people are trying to save bones, save infected bones that can't be saved.
Yeah, it is very true.
Okay, well, I didn't want to, go too far on that, but just that was my. I'm just more and more convinced the more that I look into the situation that this is the case, and I'm glad to hear that this therapy is working, but we know that that's not a cure, that there is a problem underneath there, and so now that, as soon as she gets strong enough to deal with that. Oh, and the other thing is that aside from the teeth, and Fischer spoke about this as well, is that you not only want to get that the jawbone cleaned and so on, but also the tonsils. Have her tonsils. Secondary to that, have the tonsils checked out very thoroughly too.
Well, she had a tonsillectomy when she was about 6.
Right. And Fischer emphasized very strongly that most tonsillectomies are initially a failure, that the majority of them, they leave something, there's a pocket. Yeah. So those are the two areas that I would think that you might want to have checked as soon as you can. And so that, because this thing can be licked totally if we get rid of the nest. I'm convinced of that. So I'm going to try to do something with, and it relates to polio, because most of EC's work with Mayo actually happened to be with polio. I looked at, I forget the number of articles, but it was just somewhere 30 or so articles in the Mayo proceedings, and most of those had polio in the title of them.
Yeah.
So that his work with Mayo was very closely tied with polio, and that's part of the reason why, because somebody else came up with a vaccine, they say, oh, well, Rosenow's work was no good. He missed the boat on polio.
Yeah. And see, I sent to Scott all of his publications.
Right.
Some of them, quite a few of them, in bound volumes. And I don't have anything except some correspondence that I discovered in one of my old briefcases that I found. You know how it is when you have a big cupboard.
Sure.
And it's in an out-of-the-way area in the house. And somebody has something, you say, God, what am I going to do with that? Well, put it in the cupboard. Well, I cleaned that cupboard out about 2 months ago.
Uh-huh.
And, God, the material I found, that's what I was saying to Scott weekend before last. I said, my heavens, I have all this material now and these films, and I'm going to send them. I'm going to send all the correspondence and so on to Scott.
Yeah.
I'm going to send
that's great.
film to Ed up at Mayo, Rochester. So, my experimental days are over, I'm afraid, and I regret it, but, you know, you get older and older, and soon you're, well, people say, well, now, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm just doing many calming things, other than reading every day, from the standpoint of what are you professionally? I'm a has-been. And, you know, you have to accept that. It takes a while. But
well, we have our time, you know, it's all right.
Oh, sure. Heavens, yes. No, I think I've been very lucky and to have the opportunity to, I spent the summer with him, and I spent time with him between vacations, and and summer breaks, that sort of thing. But it was a great experience, and following up on some of that work was also very, very interesting. So, well, it's been awfully nice talking.
Nice to talk to you too. I just wanted to ask if there might be some possibility if in perhaps in the spring or summer or at some point, if there might be any possibility at all of Dr. Arana inducing you to come to Carmel to talk about the vaccines at a conference.
Oh, gee.
Well, I mean, I'm not asking you for a commitment now, but just in terms of like whether I can have Dr. Arana be in contact with you and see if maybe we might do something, or just to, if it's worth even thinking about any further, because I know that he would want to pull some, a number of doctors and so on together, and that they would have questions that I'm not thinking of that would be, that might help to really pin this down. In other words, I've gone through Dr. Rosenow's articles and written up all, I have a sort of a recipe of the vaccine, so you wouldn't have to go through all of that except to, answer questions against it. You follow what I'm saying?
Sure.
If that might be a possibility at some point, or I guess they've got the, video conferencing now with computers and so on, so something could be even set up remotely as well. But I just, but it would be, I've taken notes, but I'm, like I say, some of the questions that these gentlemen or ladies might have, I may not have covered all of that ground. So I just wanted to throw that open as a possibility. I don't know if you might be available to do a weekend conference, or just.
I think if I did anything, it would be just spending some informal time with some people who had a special interest in this.
Okay.
But I wouldn't want to go to a formal conference and so on. I've done that sort of thing. I've gone to, congresses over in Sweden a couple times and that sort of thing. But those formal days are past.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it could be something like that in terms of just a session where different, you sit around and discuss what the situation is. It need not be a lecture kind of a thing.
Well, okay, it's something to think about.
Something to think about, and I'm going to talk to the two principals here, Dr. Arana and Dr. Husser, who have been pushing me mostly, and just pass that on to them and to see what maybe maybe there might be something that they might even be able to do in Ohio or something like that.
Right.
See who's there. Okay, well, like I say, most of the work in Mayo was on polio, and I've gone through that, and there's been a couple of things recently that Mayo is talking about multiple sclerosis, so I'm kind of working on a draft which kind of leads into the fraud story that you have a copy of.
Right.
From a Mayo perspective. I also have I've posted. I have a website. Do you have access to the internet at all?
No.
Okay. I do have a fraud article up posted on the internet, and it's an earlier draft that I'd sent to Nature a few years ago, and it has a return receipt letter number, so it's some sort of evidence of priority, and I'm thinking that I may post that JAMA proposal up as well, because it's a good article. We're in a new age now. If we can publish through a journal, there's no reason why not to publish on the internet.
Right.
So that it has that letter of the letter number. It's so I can have people refer to it by that